let's kick off. Welcome, everyone. My name's Andy. I'm going to be your host for today's Canterbury Tech June lunchtime session. So it's June, it's July. Sorry, get that right. So does accessing government grants and R&D tax credits make sense for New Zealand businesses, New Zealand tech businesses? As the shifting sands of politics mean less grant funding is now on offer, New Zealand tech businesses are asking how they can maximise tax credits and grants available. From startups to sector heavyweights, thousands of Kiwi businesses have used government grants and tax credits to help fund growth. And many more of these businesses have been rejected from programs or put off by red tape. So in this session, we're going to have a look at the best practice approaches to securing funding from grants and tax incentives for different size organizations. We'll cover government grants relevant for the tech sector and the two R&D tax credit programs. We'll also provide practical insights, opportunities, and the pitfalls to worry about, plus suggested strategies for real examples from New Zealand businesses. This should help you be able to make strategic decisions and identify how much time and effort to invest in your approach to government funding. But before we kick off with that session, I'm just going to do a few Canterbury Tech updates, and we'll also hand over to our speakers, Corey and Tom, after those updates. But let's go forwards. So a quick thank you to Canterbury Tech's annual sponsors. The UC Business School brings us the most relevant MBA programs and executive education program in the country. And now they've got a subscription service, so you can eat all you want and binge like Netflix to take as many courses as you like in a year. We also have AWS, known for infrastructure services, but also ready to help businesses with knowledge in a vast array of areas. AWS is vast, but if you're exploring something new, then they're a great team to reach out for. And we also choose to use the services of our annual supporters. So we use Ridiculous Digital to help with our SEO and Google rankings. We use Crescent Consulting to help us with recruitment, and Shorthouse Consulting for technology expertise. So let's just have a warm-up exercise. Welcome, everyone. We'd like to know where you've come from. So there's a set of suggestion emojis for where you might be from, but feel free to be creative. And your mood. So if you're absolutely rocking it, put the smiley faces with the stars, or perhaps not so much, then one of those other ones. So put two emojis together to tell us where you're from and how you're rocking it today. So we've got Tom, who's from Ohitahi, Christchurch, looking pretty cool there. Anybody else? I wonder if we've got anyone outside of Christchurch. Someone from the beach? Maybe that's the Gold Coast. Sheena. Some palms. Not quite sure where that is. Cool. So it seems like we've got mostly a Christchurch audience. We've got a few people. Hema from Hamilton.
Apologies
Someone
in
from the
advance,
Big Smoke.
Andy. I'm from
What's that?
Apologies in advance. I'm from Auckland, but don't throw me off the call.
No, Aucklanders are welcome. It's all fine. Cool. All right. Well, let's move forwards, guys. Now, one of the big things that's coming up is the annual Canterbury Tech Summit. The big news is we've been doing that now for 21 years. I'm super excited to say that you can buy your tickets now, and the list of speakers has been updated. And so there's a whole exciting lineup of diverse speakers. I can speak from experience, having been to the summit many times myself and also speaking at it. what a fantastic event it is. So I'd really recommend that you grab your tickets now before they run out, and look forward to seeing you there. Also, we've got some upcoming technology community events, and these are always fun things to turn up for. We've got the AI meetup, where they're looking at New Zealand transport sector. So that should be an interesting one. Salesforce are having a meeting on July for their user group, where they'll be delving into the wonderful world of dynamic forms with Charles Thompson, who's a senior program architect at Salesforce. And then quite a big event, SQL Saturday. I think I've been to quite a few of those. Really excited to announce that we're getting close to the upcoming SQL Saturday and Data Saturday event on Saturday, the 27th of July. This is a free event and is being hosted at ARA in the centre of Christchurch. I really recommend that if you're into data or SQL in any way. And it's funny how SQL is the kind of one language that never goes out of date. And then we also have a UX meetup, facilitation skills for UX professionals. So that's going to be facilitated by James Pearson. And the summary is that people are difficult, which we probably all know, and some are just generally disagreeable. Others might be having a bad day and they don't really want to be in your workshop. So with all these variety, there's other people don't like being heard and like to disappear. Some people are hungry, and for any given reason on any given day, someone might be difficult at your next workshop. So the idea of this workshop is to try and work out how to facilitate sessions with these people. And hopefully you can all turn up to this workshop being in a great mood and being helpful so that it doesn't become too meta. So yeah, those are some of the upcoming events. And I think we've also got one more. So this is next month's in real life, this forthcoming in real life Tech Tuesday event is all about low code. So we're going to have Natasha Savide, the technical director of integration and automation at Inditech, and she's going to present breaking dependencies, building easier to support solutions with low/no code tools. Natasha will explore the benefits of low code tools for process automation and share some real experiences from in-house and consulting. So look forward to that upcoming in real life event on Tech Tuesday. That's going to be held on Tuesday, the 6th of August at the Christchurch City Library, Tauranga. And the other thing, and just interestingly, I've been to the library recently, and I found out they've got some amazing facilities in their makerspace. So if you do get a chance to go to the library, check out the makerspace. They've got laser printers, they've got sewing machines, they've got laser cutters, not laser printers. That's a bit old school. Laser cutters, 3D printers, and all sorts of great stuff in their makerspace. So yeah, really recommend the library. Cool. Okay, now let me hand over to Corey and Tom. So a quick introduction to both of them. Corey Laverty is the Senior R&D Consultant at BlueRock NZ. Corey works with New Zealand businesses to get R&D credits and government grants for people. This builds on Corey's prior experience in academic research funding at European and Australian universities and research organizations. Corey has a background in science and economics, and he also has a particular passion for biomedical engineering and digital tech. And also let me hand over to Tom Moore. He's the director of BlueRock NZ. Tom leads BlueRock, not BlackRock, but BlueRock's grants and incentives offering in Australia and New Zealand. Tom has degrees in science and commerce and extensive experience with business advisory services. And Tom has worked with every kind of business from startups to listed multinationals and everything in between. So I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Corey and Tom and thank them for agreeing to talk to us today at this lunchtime tech session. And with that, I'll hand over to them. So just give us a moment while we switch the slides over and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Andy, for organising today. Let's get these slides up. I think we're all good. Andy, can you just confirm that for me?
Yep, that's looking good.
Good stuff. All right, everyone, welcome. My name's Tom. As Andy said, I'm a director at BlueRock, New Zealand. Today's focus is on funding. So what we call non-dilutive funding or funding from grants or tax credits. We're going to talk about kind of what some of the programs are, although not necessarily in detail. Today is more about awareness and strategies. The topic is whether grants are still relevant for tech businesses. And it's one of the kind of refrains that we've heard over and over, and probably in the last year, is that people in the tech sector don't think that the grants are relevant for them anymore. They might have had a bad experience with a program and got a rejection, or they might have been told, it seems there's a bit of a word on the street that the grants are more for the science sector and not the tech sector, if you want to call them that, or divide them up like that, or that they might be for academia but not for business. It's not quite correct. It's not what we're seeing. So, however, there is a changing landscape, or the landscape has changed. And so today's probably, or hopefully for most of you, going to fill in those gaps, help you with that awareness. And then off the back of that, you could go away and form your own strategies around accessing some of this funding. Just a quick shout out to BlueRock. So BlueRock is in Australia, headquartered out of Melbourne, a professional services firm. If you look at this infinity loop, that's everything we do. However, in New Zealand, we only do the grants and tax incentives. That's purely by virtue of Corey and I being here, and it's the service offering that we focus on. However, if you are in Australia or you're planning on taking your business to Australia, there are many things that BlueRock can help with in regards to just kind of your business and your life. I'm going to hand it over to Corey, who is my colleague and leads our grants and tax incentives offering here in New Zealand. Cool.
Thanks, Tom. And I'm just going to keep presenting off the same laptop. Kia ora koutou. Hi, everyone. Or Corey, tōku ingoa. I'm Corey, and as Andy mentioned, I once upon a time thought I was going to be an academic. I studied genetics and got about 3 months into that career before I decided that that was a bit crazy, and ended up doing some academic editing and project management for research grants, which led into grant applications, first for universities and then for businesses. So I've worked on hundreds of different applications and different grant programs, which seem to come and go. And now with BlueRock, I've got quite deep into these tax credits as well. Joined BlueRock 2 years ago, late 22, as we set up here in Ōtautahi. And this slide you're seeing at the moment is just how I see the New Zealand funding landscape, just sort of themes, nothing official here. So we've got some, well, this is the relevant topics for tech businesses anyway. Of course, there's plenty of other government funding, like there's a big new infrastructure fund that's come out, though I don't think there'll be much in there for tech businesses, innovation. So on this slide, we've got general funds for R&D that we're going to talk about a bit more. Some money for commercialization, good money for primary industries. Deep tech seems to tick a lot of boxes. Clean tech demonstration through ECA, which, if it's not directly useful for your company, might be good for your customers. Then there's a few minority funds for safety and risk reduction out of ACC, EQC, Waka Kotahi, the NZTA. And recently we've got digital gaming sector supported pretty well. And there's always some support for, well, for want of a better term, the Māori economy, linkages to Māori researchers, Māori businesses, Mātauranga Māori. So we've also seen, of course, both with this government and the previous government, that some funding has been disestablished or reduced, like the Climate Emergency Response Fund, the large government investment decarbonising industry. There was a MPI fund, Sustainable Land Management, that's gone. Some academic funding has been ramped down for the CRIs and universities, reduced amounts for Endeavour, Marsden, HRC. National Science Challenges are gone. Industry transformation plans are gone. But there's still plenty available. So at least good generic options, I think, for tech companies, which we've tried to sort of list here. And I won't go through them all. We've got a link at the bottom where we try to keep things up to date. Just to call out a couple at the top, the Callaghan student grants, the career and experience ones. They're not much money, but they can be really valuable to get an intern or a graduate in. And you can go for them again and again. You can get multiple ones. The success rate is practically 100%. The second grant there, the new to R&D grant, I do want to raise awareness about, because it was undersubscribed to start with. Even now, I think the rules originally were less attractive, and then they basically doubled what you could get out of it. So less well known, but really good if you're a new company. The main rule is you can't have spent more than 50,000 on R&D. So to qualify as being new to R&D. In contrast, that Arahia Innovation Trailblazer is really well known and oversubscribed somewhat. But we see a lot of people who go for that end up either not being eligible, not being innovative enough, or not. It's not quite suited to their business, because it requires you to stay off market while you're getting the grant. And as soon as you go on market, the grant stops. So it's funding this sort of post R&D pre-launch commercialization phase that, especially for software companies or anyone with an MVP model, they don't really have the large phase in between those two things. So we find a lot of people who are looking at that, actually, especially the earlier stage businesses, actually end up finding the new to R&D more attractive. Look, I won't go through them all. We will spend some time on the tax credits at the top right there. The RDTI is quite well known. The R&D loss tax credit less so, and so that's a good one to talk about, and you can combine the two. So a key difference, tax credits to grants, of course, is like a grant might be, they're usually competitive, limited funds, sort of time limited. Maybe you can only apply for it once, but tax credit is an entitlement. It's written into law. You can apply for it as long as you're eligible and receive the funding. A rebate's sort of somewhere in between. It's not that games development rebate. It doesn't run through the tax system, but you do sum up your costs at the end of the tax year, and then it's administered by New Zealand On Air. You get a 20% payment, not directly as part of your tax calculation. So yeah, it's called a rebate. Anyway, so let's have a look at the RDTI first, and I won't bore you with the details of it. There's plenty of other places you can go for that, but I want to call out some of the points here. The point here is to do like more of the strategic points, the strategy for going for it, and some tips how to combine it with the other ones. So the RDTI is jointly administered by Callaghan and the IRD. First, you've got to make this big submission to Callaghan describing your activities and how they qualify as R&D. And then at the end of each year, you submit your costs to the IRD, who take Callaghan's word for it that what you are doing is eligible. It's a refundable tax credit, meaning it offsets your income tax for the business. And if that offset goes into negative, you can get a cash refund up to the value of 15% of your R&D expenses for the year, with some caps. But it's available to most private sector businesses in New Zealand, not if you're majority Crown controlled or public in some way. So it's for New Zealand businesses doing New Zealand research, although you can submit 10% of your claim for foreign costs if you need to do them overseas. Now, the one rule there at the bottom, which is a minimum spend of 50,000 per year before you can go to it to qualify for the RDTI. However, if you're not at that level, as you're just starting out, then look at spending your costs with an approved research provider. There's a list down the bottom there, because there's no minimum for that. You can still get the RDTI for whatever you spend, and it's always going to be refunded, which is quite good. And if your costs are really low and you haven't even spent 50K over the last few years, then go to that new R&D grant that we were talking about before looking at this RDTI. It's just not going to be worth your while for a couple of years. Now, if you're loss making, then you should combine this with the other tax credit I'll talk about in a minute, the R&D loss tax credit, and you can get 43% back, basically off most of your R&D expenses. If you have no PAYE employees, you're not going to get a refund. You're usually not going to get a refund out of this, unless you have them in a subsidy company or a parent company. The reasoning is whatever you've paid in your payroll tax to the ID is the limit of how much you can get back in your RDTI claim. And if you've got no employees and you're just donating your time, you're bootstrapping your business, you also can't claim for that as an eligible expense. So it's only real expenses. Yeah, obviously, if you're offshoring labor, then just remember to factor in these tax credits and grants to sort of get a real comparison of whether it's cheap or not. So here's a slide we've drawn up on what qualifies as R&D for the RDTI. If you think of this as a timeline from left to right of developing a product, everything with an X, starting with your business case, doesn't qualify in general as being R&D, whereas the highlighted parts in the middle should qualify. So you start off with I won't talk through it all. Researching it, doing your core, and then you're launching it onto the market, commercializing it, that later stage. So the point should be fairly clear. Not the whole life cycle of product development is eligible, just the phase where you're developing your technology. And that's the related point. It's not all products, really. It's mostly technology products, new technology products, because of how they define research and development for this RDTI. It has to be an activity that's resolving an uncertainty in science or an uncertainty with technology, which is like a mouthful of a phrase. Resolving the uncertainty in technology usually plays out when you're developing new technology or pushing the boundary of what technology can do. And then if you can define that, then that's your core R&D that qualifies for this, and then you can wrap around it some supporting costs, but still not the whole product life cycle. So if you're in the digital software space, we've got a second slide here. I think these slides come around afterwards, which is basically the same thing, but with a few software specific terms. The main point being, we hear quite a lot, software development doesn't count or it's not eligible. I mean, software development alone is not enough. You can't just say, I'm developing software, give me the credits. You just have to apply that same lens of looking for the technological uncertainty that you're pushing past when you're developing your software. And then that defines your core R&D, and you can expand out to get some of the supporting costs. Not the whole life cycle like what the gaming development sector can claim under the GDSR, but still a significant fraction of your expenses. App building alone wouldn't qualify, not enough technological uncertainty. User experience, user interface research also alone is not really a technological uncertainty, but it can be supporting your core work here. So don't get too put off by being a digital company. Last thing I wanted to say about RDTI is how you get your pre-approval through Callaghan. You've got a few options, which is quite nice with the New Zealand program. Options A, B, C there. You can apply for basically pre-approval of 1, 2, or 3 core years. That's the years I've highlighted in green there. And an optional prior year and an optional supporting year, getting up to 5 years span pre-approved. So if you can reasonably foresee that your R&D is going to last more than 1 year and you can justify that, then make your application bigger to start with, because you get through that significant hurdle. That's much easier, right? Or only once. You can submit amendments or updates, add a new activity at the end of each tax year if you need to. The relevant deadline is in the middle there, that green arrow, 7th of May. If you're a 31st March business, that is, you've got to adjust everything to your tax date. But most people are in this situation. So that's the next one coming up, meaning all of your costs back to 1st April this year on the core and 1st April last year, 2023, on the supporting can still be claimed. if you're not quite there yet, you'd be wanting to wait until the first year where you have significant costs. So you get some people register a bit early and then they get to the end of the tax year and don't have a lot of claim to make out of it, or they don't have PAYE people yet, and then they're just getting credits. Credits are still good, by the way, because you can save them up for offsetting future tax, right? So now to the second one, the R&D loss tax credit, the cash out, which is less well known. It's nothing to do with Callaghan. This is administered by the IRD, so it's a streamlined process. It's just a yearly application. You still have to describe your R&D and how it meets the definition and put together all your costs. But this is only for loss-making companies, so you need a net loss in the tax year. And it's not so much a tax credit itself as it's a program to cash out your tax credits to get a cash refund up to the value of 28% of your R&D expenses, which is your business tax rate, 28%. This is only for unlisted New Zealand companies and only on New Zealand costs. No 10% from foreign can sneak in here. There's no minimum spend, which is good. You don't need that 50,000. So even very early stage businesses can go to this. But you do have to have spent 20% of real wages or salary bill on R&D expense. And that also applies at a group level. If you've got related companies, being companies that are 66% in common ownership or more, then that whole group has to have a wage bill of 20%, and it has to the whole group has to be in loss. You can't just spin out a separate company to hold all the losses that makes the claim. I've made that point in the middle there. The top tip there, if you've got less than 20% wages, there are a few options that you can get over the 20% by looking at some contractor costs, shareholder employee salaries, sorry, KiwiSaver employer contributions. And the bottom point is something to keep in mind, which is there are a few situations where you will have to repay the amount that you've cashed out. So they're not the usual situation. The usual situation, or the imagined situation, is that you become profitable and then you start paying income tax on those profits. That tax would have been shielded, but it's not because you've cashed it out. So the amount that you pay is treated as a repayment of this this amount that you've cashed out. But in some situations where you are selling your IP, or if the company is being wound up and you've received some income that's not taxable, then they're still going to take a slice of that revenue, rather than income, revenue, to help pay back these R&D loss tax credits, arguing that now you have some cash from selling your IP, so you can pay it back. That's not the normal situation, but it's something to keep in mind. It's described. This whole program is described online as being a loan, an interest-free loan, but it's not a loan. It's just that they're saying you can think about it as shifting the benefits earlier in time by cashing it out now. And of course, cash now is better than credits later for a lot of early stage companies. Here's how they combine. So let's say you've got 100K of expenses that you've got approved through Callaghan. You get your 15K back from Callaghan, or from the RDTI program. You can also usually submit most of that to the R&D loss tax credit for an additional 28K back, meaning 43% refund of those expenses. You might have other costs that don't qualify for Callaghan, or you haven't got pre-approved by Callaghan through the RDTI, that you can still go send to the R&D loss tax credit for 28%, right? So I should point out there's different definitions of R&D for both of these. That RDTI definition is what we looked at with the science and technological uncertainty. The R&D loss tax credit definition is closer to an accounting definition of what we normally think of as research and development, which is basically wider. Though there are some exclusions, most of that supporting type activity like foreign costs won't qualify. But as a rule of thumb, if it qualifies for RDTI core R&D activity, then you can submit it to R&D loss tax credit, and not usually the other way around. This is most businesses, by the way, once you're spending 50K or so, and if you're making a loss. Here's a couple of real examples. We had one company 136K of expenses that could go to both getting the 43% back, but they had some additional expenses there, 50K or so, that can just go to the R&D loss tax credit. So that's good. Here's another one which had 883, but they had everything pre-approved by Callahan's for the RDTI, so they could get it at 154 refund. Then they hit this cap on the refund related to how much PAYE they had. So the last little bit came as a credit. Hey, they can still save that up for the future. And then they turned around and submitted 883 to the R&D loss tax credit too. One more page of advanced maths, and then I think I'm done, which is a company that's just starting out and getting some funding from a grant. And I've got the new to R&D grant here. So that's if you've got less than 50K spend on R&D, you can get a new to R&D grant, but it could be any grant. So if you have, say, 100K expenses, that's 40K grant funded and 60K you're putting yourself. That 40K obviously is all coming from the grant, but you can't submit it to the RDTI or the R&D loss tax credit. But the 60K self-funded portion can be submitted to the R&D loss tax credit if you're on loss for the tax year. So that adds up to a 57% funding rate for your 100K of expenses. So if you can go for this grant, then you should, or a similar grant, right? And then once you get past that grant, then you would go to the RDTI and look to get everything approved by the RDTI, and still keep submitting for the R&D loss tax credit while you're in losses to get your 43%. Those are the main points we wanted to cover. We've got a list of links here, both to the official program pages and also to some articles that we've written about it. And this is us. Thank you, everybody, for attending and for the time that you've donated to this session. Andy, do we take questions live?
Yeah, well, yeah, just a big shout out to Tom and Corey there for providing us that insight. And cash is king. So whenever you're starting some kind of new venture, knowing all of the tricks and tricks for how to raise money and to keep your business floating with money is pretty important. So like getting this insight is really, really useful. So really big thank you to Tom and Corey. What we'll do is if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them through in the chat, and then I'll ask those through to Tom and Corey, and we can get their insights. So yeah, no, just while we're waiting for some of the other people to have questions, I might put one of mine through myself. Is like, it does seem like quite intimidating to try and access these funding, and the definition of R&D seems quite off-putting. Like,
yeah,
when I'm writing software, I don't think of it as am I doing R&D or not doing R&D. It's just software. So like trying to distinguish when you're doing R&D seems like a really important thing to do, and perhaps it's something that when we're recording our activities in our time, making a distinction in our user stories or keeping notes. Is that something that you'd recommend to people, is like how we can account for when is activities being R&D and when is it just bog standard software development?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so look, research and development, I'll talk first about the RDTI. That's the smaller amount of 15%, but it is available whether you're profitable or loss making. That is really focused on scientific and technological uncertainty. But if we cut through that jargon, we talk about the technical challenges. If you're ever in a meeting with Callahan and they're trying to drill down on this, they'll ask you, what were the real head scratches? What were the key technical challenges that you couldn't get past and you couldn't readily resolve by going to the source material? So for example, if it's an integration, even if it's difficult, but there is an API and a software development kit or a forum or somewhere where the answers are buried, it's still not likely to qualify for that R&D program. However, if there are no answers, if you have to go away and follow a systematic process to establish what they are, which might be some sort of design, build, test, or experiment, if you like, that would represent that level of uncertainty. Going back out to the 28% program, which if you're in your early stages and you're pre-profit, let's say, or if you're not having a profitable year, that's a more broad definition. Some that, again, it's difficult to give you an exact example without a case to talk to, but it is going to be more widely available. Some of that that kind of challenging coding and software development, software engineering work may be eligible for that program. Best advice I can give is to come and talk to either the program themselves, which you can access by approaching Callaghan Innovation, or through in Canterbury through Business Canterbury or Christchurch NZ, or come talk to us. Corey and I are always keen to have those conversations, and as I said, it's much easier to talk to a specific example than it is to kind of project some sort of description that covers all there.
Okay, thanks for that. And we have another question in here from Steve Wakefield. How much does it cost to get assistance from these grants to review an existing grant application or to help complete a new one?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a little bit how long's a piece of string, or what's the price of fish might be a better example. It depends what we include as in scope and what the level involvement from us is. That said, to give you a guide for a review, Corey and I have done that kind of work from I want to say $1,000 upwards, unless it's there have been very simple reviews, but almost to the level where you don't need help.
Yeah.
And then for more complex, kind of actually getting involved, helping develop the project for the grant application, writing the grant application and managing that process. Again, the price range would probably be sort of 7,000 up to 20,000, depending on what's required.
It really depends on what kind of grant or how big your business is. If you go into the tax credits, it's such a huge range of activity that's involved.
And then thanks. There's another question here from Joseph. And he's saying thank you for the talk there and the information on the tax credits. He's specifically interested in charities, and probably from my perspective, working for Canterbury Tech for not-for-profits. Are there any extra grants or R&D benefits that could be available to not-for-profits or charities?
Yeah, charities can't get both of these, unfortunately. But there are a few. Actually, it depends what your charity is. So there's a few through like impact investing and non-governmental funds. It's probably better if we touch base afterwards. And Joseph in man.
Sounds like
So we've got
topic.
Grants are typically sort of, there are business grants and then the other community grants, which would be charities and the like. So
Yeah.
Corey and I are very focused on the business grants, but we do have the means to search for the charities grants. So Joseph will be happy to catch up with you and have share some information with you, which we'll have to go away and find.
And another question from myself, just being selfish here. So if I was thinking of launching a brand new technology startup, when should I start thinking about tax credits, and what should I be doing to try and maximize my my potential cashback or returns or credits?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say it's not too early when you're budgeting for your expenditure over time to factor those in. However, tax credit applications are made retrospectively, so you don't necessarily need to look at those until towards the end of the year in which you start. But grants are usually prospectively, and most grant programs will say that they will not cover anything that's already happened. So if you're looking specifically at grants, and if we go back to the difference between grants and tax incentives, grants were sort of the competitive program-based options. You'll want to be looking at those before you let's just say into the weeds of what your project involves, especially with regards to the expenses.
And it's really good to have guys like yourself to assist here, because when you're building your business, you want to be building your business and not worrying about the complexities and vagaries of R&D tax credits. So having someone like yourself to talk to sounds like a really, really good idea. So yeah, I know that I'd like to spend my time building the business rather than trying to looking up the complexities of strange tax laws.
Yeah,
so that's why having this knowledge is so useful.
Manual.
Sorry, what was that?
The first one, that RDTI, has like a 200-page guide on how to interpret it. And so who's got time to read that?
And so then we have another question through from Tony. What about grants? Maybe commercialization where there is a possible trial in a foreign non-English speaking country.
Yeah, it's quite specific. I mean, that Arrow here grant is supposed to pay for commercialization, but it's very competitive at the top level. If your commercialization is spinning out a university technology, or if you're deep tech in some way that's building off academic research, then there are a couple of smaller funds you could look at there. Possible trial in a foreign non-English speaking country might fall under a couple of rules. Would depend on which one you're going for. Because you know, if we're looking at New Zealand government money, they want to be seeing the benefit back to New Zealand. And that changes depending on where the funds are coming from, obviously.
And another question for myself, what would you say the sort of general direction of travel for how much grant funding is available? How easy is it to access? Are we heading towards making it easier for businesses to access these funding? Is there more money available, or have the government started tightening up, and is it actually getting harder?
Yeah, well, we've experienced that government is tightening up. Corey alluded to a number of larger programs that have been closed. However, I think that the message that's being lost is that that's sort of like an all-encompassing tightening. But the point we're trying to get across today is that especially for tech businesses, some of these programs are still available. Some of them have improved. And if you look at even the likes of the new to R&D, the funding has effectively doubled, or the availability of the funding has doubled, let's say. So the taps are not off, but the flow has been reduced a little.
I think I've seen a shift towards becoming easier to access to. Even if you look at the early years of the RDTI, the rules were applied much more strictly than they are now. Or that new gaming development rebate is taken care to simplify the process for the applicants, which is quite good. Hopefully that trend continues.
Okay, I'll just put out one last shout out for any additional questions, and then we might wrap up. So get your questions in now, or we'll move on. Okay, I think that's most of the questions from the room. So once again, a big shout out to Corey and Tom for helping us understand the vagaries of tax credits and trying to help get your tech startup or whatever size business to get as much money back from the government as possible. All right, thanks very much, guys, and big shout out there. So we'll just wrap that up and say thank you to everyone else for attending. These lunchtime tech sessions are brought to you by Canterbury Tech. We really enjoy putting these on. Don't forget to come to the in-person Canterbury Tech event, where we also have refreshments provided, and look forward to seeing you at the Tech Summit. So big thank you to everyone for turning up today, and have a great lunch.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Bye.
see you guys. Bye.